Hi, everyone. Your godmother's here. This month is top 10 British horror films. And I'm not going to lie, this was a hard one to narrow down. So come at me in the comments. Tell me where I messed up. I know I certainly missed some really popular ones. Again, this is my top 10 list, but I'd love to hear yours. I'll also be adding those keywords for those who are playing along with the passport game, which if you need information about that, you can find that in my Substack, which, just look up Elaine Pascale or the Godmother of Horror for that. So let's dive right in. Number 10 is Eden Lake from 2008, directed by James Watkins and starring Kelly Riley and Michael Fassbender. This is a rough one to watch. This is a rough watch. Let me just warn you. Audiences remain divided on it. Even though it was 2008, you're like, oh, I can handle a 2008 film. I'm in the year of our Lord 2026. I've seen it all. No, this one's tough. It's about a couple that sets out for a weekend on the lake. And once there, they find a group of unruly teens. And I'm being very kind because these teens are actually monstrous. And, this is one of those instances where our main characters make some bad choices. So we do work on our sympathy for them a little bit because, first of all, they go and Michael Fassbender confronts the teens. Your godmother wouldn't do that. Your godmother would, go find a new spot. No. But he goes and confronts them. Then they do things like entering into a stranger's house and not going for help when they're supposed to go for help, things like that. And again, on the streets of Reddit, we argue about this and whether that takes from the film or adds to it. Trigger warning, there is dog harm, but you don't see a lot of it, but it still, it upset me. There's a ton of body horror, a ton. And there is one scene that viewers will talk about until the end of time. There is one scene that when you mention this film to people who've watched it, everybody brings up that scene. So just know that people are very traumatized by this one scene. It's bad. It's very, very bad. There's also a lot of predictable stuff. Like, if a woman's running in the woods, she's going to twist her ankle and fall, right? And she's going to or she's going to step on something that you're like, really? Out of all the places to be treading in the woods, you had to step on that, that kind of stuff. But again, these teens are just psychopaths. They're terrifying. And in 2008, they were mind-blowing. So you're wondering, why did this make the list if this is just so disturbing? What I like about this film is what it says about cycles of violence and the way violence is sometimes taught culturally in certain cultures, and almost expected, especially of young men. And I always find it really creepy when we deal with like small clannish towns where if you're on the wrong foot in that clannish town, you could never get back on the right foot. We're going to see more of that in this list. And we have a very young Jack O'Connell. He is our main thug in this film. And he was impressive even back then. Let's move on to number 9, which is the nostalgia pick. And that is Don't Look Now from 1973, directed by Nicholas Reagan, starring Donald Sutherland. And man, God bless, but Donald Sutherland made really bad mustache choices back in the 70s. I mean, your godmother is not a mustache fan to begin with, and his are just distracting. I don't know. And Julie Christie's also in this, and she's beautiful. This is based on a wonderful short story by Daphne du Maurier. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. I recommend reading much of her writing. In this film, we have a married couple who's traveling to Venice following the recent accidental death of their daughter. And the reason why they're in Venice is because Donald Sutherland, the husband, has accepted a commission to restore a church. And this is totally something that would happen in real life and not a piece of travel porn and fantasy about rich people. It reminds me of, I watch movies and they'll have writers and it'll be the writer's first book and they'll be like, yeah, I got an advance for $8 billion, and they're sitting in this office that's, their office is bigger than like 3 homes put together with a mahogany desk and the bookshelves that go floor to ceiling. I mean, nope, that never ever has. And that's kind of like what's happening here, right? But anyway, they're in Venice and they encounter these 2 sisters, one of whom is clairvoyant. And she tells them that their daughter is trying to contact them and warn them of danger. And as in most films, especially in the 70s, the wife believes all this hokum. Like she's all in on the clairvoyance. And the husband is a skeptic. But weird things start happening. So the husband starts to, question, like maybe this is real. Now, this film famously has a scene that people claim is a real live sex scene between Sutherland and Julie Christie, and I'm not sure why they couldn't simulate sex and would need to actually have been intimate with each other. And my only thought is that they didn't have intimacy coaches back in the 70s, so this could be really problematic. I mean, I wouldn't want Donald Sutherland coming at me with that mustache. No. Not enough money in the world. No. This film is a slow burn, but wait to the last act. It's a ripper. And as I said earlier, please read the story. It's a wonderful story. Number 8 is Saint Maud in 2019, directed by Rose Glass, who's a cousin of George for you Brady Bunch fans, and starring Morfydd Clark. So in the beginning of this film, we see a nurse named Katie, and she's performing CPR on a patient, but the patient dies in her care, despite her efforts. So Katie, sometime later, is now calling herself Maud, and she's become a devout Catholic, and she's working as a hospice nurse in an English seaside town. And she's assigned to care for this woman, Amanda, who in her youth was a dancer and choreographer in the US. And let me just say, Amanda lived her life. Like Amanda did what Amanda wanted to do. She had some good fun, the kind of fun that certain Catholics would not appreciate. Amanda's now terminally ill with cancer. And yes, you're like, Godmother, I thought you didn't watch films with cancer. I thought you would get up and leave if there's cancer involved. And usually I do, yes. But I stuck around for this one, and I'm glad I did. Maud believes that God is tasking her to save Amanda's soul. So I don't want to give too much away. Some events happen. And as you're watching this, you might be like, well, where's the horror here? Because this is another really slow burn. And keep in mind, it's an A24 film. Those of you who love A24 like me, you know what this is. You know how it's going to sort of build and play out. And it's going to take a little while, but enjoy the ride. The end is absolutely amazing, mind-blowing. Don't go on YouTube and watch the ending first. Don't do that to yourself. That's no fun. And I am chomping at the bit because I have a Saint Maud secret that I would love to reveal soon. Soon, my lovelies. Soon I will be able to reveal it. Let's move on to number 7, which is Caliber from 2018. And this is, yes, more of a psychological thriller than flat out horror. But I love this movie, and I wanted it on my list at the expense of some horror films. Yes. And you can come at me and argue, but I love this movie. It's directed by Matt Palmer and starring Jack Lowden and Martin McCain. And this is another, small town, small village. Everybody knows each other. We have these 2 friends who are from out of town. They find themselves in the wrong place and eventually over their heads. This is one of those, and I love this scenario too, where we're watching people, and I mean, this happens in Eden Lake as well, where you're like, don't do that, don't do that. You can still turn back. And they're not listening because they can't hear us because we're watching a movie that they're in and they're not real people. Um, and then eventually they can't turn back because they just do gone further and further down and gotten themselves into further and further trouble. And that's what happens here. We have two friends who are going on a weekend hunting trip in the Scottish Highlands, and it looks beautiful. They spend the first evening at a village pub, and already you're kind of like they meet the community leaders and some women and stuff, but I got the feeling like, oh, these guys don't really belong here. But there's some drinking and flirting, and one of the guys hooks up with one of the women while the other has a pregnant fiance at home, and he's going to remain faithful to her. The next morning, they're both hungover. They head out hunting, which right away you're like, guys, not a good idea. And here's something very, 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 very bad happens. Did I mention something bad happens? I'm not going to spoil it, but let's just say something very, very bad happens, and the friends try to cover it up, and that gets them into hot water, and then hotter water, and even hotter water. I mean, boy, when I say hotter, boiling hot, scalding hot water. And then one friend is given an ultimatum that none of us would want. So this one is tense. Tense. And yes, it's not full on horror. It's more psychological, but it made my number 7 because I do love this film. So let's move on to number 6, which is His House from 2020, directed by Remy Weeks and starring Wunmi Masako, who many of you know from Sinners, and Sophie Deruso. This film's it's heavy. It's heavy. It's about these refugees, Bol and Rial, and they're fleeing from Sudan with their daughter. And when I say fleeing, I mean like they are on this overpacked tiny boat, like not even a boat. Like my paddleboard would probably be bigger, right? It's not a good trip. This is not a luxury cruise. They're just packed in there with tons of people, and many people do not survive, including their daughter. So they're finally given like probational asylum in England 3 months later, and the government puts them in this really shabby, depressing house with like peeling walls, and it's just, and they're told like, hey, we could deport you at any time. And there's all this, like racism around them and hatred from their neighbors, and just like for example, their caseworker comes and he's like, I hope you guys are 2 of the good ones, like that kind of stuff where you're like, So the husband really tries to assimilate. He sings football songs. He tells her, hey, use utensils instead of your hands when you eat. He starts dressing very British because he thinks, hey, they're watching us, and I want them to see us and see that, we are the good ones. We're trying to fit in. However, the wife, really clings to the culture. She still dresses as she did. She sits on the floor when she eats. In the meantime, really strange things are happening in this house, and they decide they're being haunted by a witch, and that they need to pay a debt to make things right, but they are not really sure like what that debt is. So we follow them as ghosts from the past keep appearing, and it sort of helps them come to terms with the choices that they've made. And yes, I know I've complained about like trauma-based horror and how tired I am of it, but I really liked this film. I felt like the characters were interesting. The acting was fantastic. And I really liked the way it was filmed. Number 5 is The Ritual from 2017, directed by David Bruckner and starring Roth Spall and Arshur Ali. And I know I've reviewed this one before. I was so impressed with this when it first came out. I was impressed with the tension, which is relentless. This is a intense movie. Um, but I was also really impressed with how realistic the dialogue between the friends was. Like they felt real to me, this group of friends. So let's talk about these friends. In the very, very beginning, we have five of them, and they're trying to plan like a boys' trip. And one of them, named Rob, says, "Hey, let's go hiking in Sweden." But the others are like, "No, come on, let's go to Vegas." You know what I mean? Let's do something else. So they're kind of like, okay, let's figure it out. And then Rob and Luke go into a liquor store, and while they're in there, there's a robbery, and Rob is killed, and Luke is hiding. And this really made me very sympathetic because we all want to be a hero. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. We're going to talk about how people shake out. In our minds, we all want to be the hero. We all want to be the brave one. But that's not always what happens. And Luke, in this instance, freezes and can't do anything. And it plagues him. And it also, the friends kind of were like, you let him die. There's some tension there because of this incident. But regardless, 6 months later, they say, you know what, let's do that hiking trip to commemorate Rob. And one of the friends hurts his knees. So they're like, let's take a shortcut. It's going to be easier because we're going to have to basically kind of carry this guy, as he limps along. And and your godmother knows, because we've all read Little Red Riding Hood, to stick to the trails. Don't go off the trail. Don't leave the path, but they do. And they go into the forest and they come across this moose that's been gutted and hanging and all these symbols. And it just escalates from there. And this is folk horror, but I love the way it intertwines ideas of masculinity and friendship and intimacy among men. I love it. That's, it's one of my favorite things and something I'm really hung up on now with my television watching, because I've been watching DTF St. Louis, and I've been watching Half Man and other things. The one complaint that I originally had was with the creature design. I wasn't a big fan of it. It kind of, I wanted more, or I wanted less. So I'm not quite sure. I wanted something different. But I know a lot of people really enjoyed the creature in this film, and that's kind of made me want to rethink it a little bit. But again, the tension in this film is really great. It's an exciting movie to watch. Number 4 is The Descent from 2005, written and directed by Neil Marshall and starring Shauna McDonald and Natalie Mendoza. Okay, so this, you're like, Godmother, this is Appalachian Mountains. No, that's where it's set. Supposedly, we're supposed to imagine we're in the Appalachian Mountains. But it was produced by British companies. It was filmed in the UK, although some of the sequences were shot like in Scotland. But whatever, it's a British film. Trust me. And we have a car crash in the beginning to traumatize viewers. I mean, these freaking car crashes. Anyway, one of our main characters, Sarah, in this car crash, her husband and child die. And then 1 year later, there's a girls' trip. This is almost like the opposite of the ritual, the boys' trip, the girls' trip. We have a girls' trip where Sarah and some of her friends go spelunking. And again, it's supposed to be the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, but that's not where it was filmed. So they hike to this mountain cave, and they descend into the cave. And as they're making their way through, Sarah becomes stuck in this narrow tunnel. And when I say narrow, if you have claustrophobia, do not watch this film. Don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. Anyway, she pulls herself out right before it all collapses, which blocks their way going back. Now they're blocked. They have to go forward. And one of the women on the trip says, actually, I took us off the map and we're going in an unexplored cave system, which means no one's going to be able to find them. They have to get themselves out. Again, your godmother knows. Stay on the path. Stay on the path. Stay on the path. So they have to find their way out. And again, the claustrophobia of this film is crazy. I'm not claustrophobic, but it even got to me. There's some body horror in terms of injury. There's some admissions of infidelity. And creatures. Yeah, there's a little bit of a creature feature going on here. Famously, there are two endings, one that was a UK ending and one that was a US ending. The UK ending is much darker, and the US is considered a happy ending, and these are debatable. And your godmother loves to debate these. Like I will get in the weeds. I will get in the weeds with this and debate these endings. So if you would like to debate them, please reach out to me. I would love to. I would love to talk about these different endings. Number 3 is Dog Soldiers from 2002, directed by Neil Marshall and starring Sean Pertwee and Liam Cunningham. And this was in my top 10 werewolf movie list, as it should be. And one of you told me that you hated the way I say wolf. So now I'm so like overly conscious and nervous about it. But anyway, this movie's 25 years old. It still really holds up. There's some good gore and anxiety-inducing tension. And I love the camaraderie between the soldiers. So in this movie, we have a squad of British soldiers who are dropped into a remote area of the Scottish Highlands. Again, we've got a Scottish Highland film. And they're supposed to carry out a training exercise against this special ops unit. And then the next morning, they find that that unit has been ripped to shreds. They find their remains, and it's not pretty. So they end up hiding in an isolated house during a full moon. And you got it. They have to try to survive while under attack. There's great tension, great gore, and I love the ending. The ending has this kind of LOL moment, but it really lands. I mean, it took a risk, but it really lands well. Number 2 was on my top 10 zombie film list, and that's 28 Days Later from 2002. Another 2002. 2002 gave us some good stuff. Directed by Danny Boyle and starring Cillian Murphy. And isn't that all you need to know? You just say Cillian Murphy and I'm there. So, funny side story. I really love the ending of A Quiet Place. And I took to the streets and loudly said, we don't need a sequel, leave it as it is. And I stood on that hill, 10 toes down, saying it with my full chest until I saw the trailer and I saw Cillian Murphy. And I got all tingly, as you do when you see Cillian Murphy. And I really had to eat crow. Some of my friends were like, wait a minute, I thought you were like so against this. And I was like, yeah, I was. But I wasn't picturing Cillian Murphy. There's also a really good graphic novel, 28 Days Later. But so in this film, we have a group of animal rights activists who go into the science lab where these chimpanzees have been infected with a rage virus. And they know that. The activists know that. And when you go, if you watch my top 10 zombie films, I talk about the different ways that zombies are formed, and the rage virus is one of them. An activist releases one of the chimpanzees that bites her, and this virus just spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads like wildfire, causing societal collapse. 28 days later, hence the title, our main character wakes up from a coma, and he's in London, and it's almost like he's the last man on earth. So he sets out to find other survivors, and here we have the godmother's favorite thing, right? Say it with me. Say it with me. Ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, and how does it all shake out? You getting tired of that yet? I love it. I'm sorry. So we have our baddies here, right? We have the people who take advantage of the situation in diabolical ways, and then we have our heroes. And I postulate, this is only my hypothesis, this is your godmother's hypothesis, that most of the people in the world, in real life, most of us would fall into the category of hero followers. Meaning we're not all leaders, but the majority of us make the right choice and do the right thing and wouldn't hook up with the baddies and follow them and become intertwined with them. You can argue with me about that. I love the way this is filmed. I love the way the zombies move. This movie really changed the zombie genre. You know, we used to have those slow moving zombies where you'd watch it and you're like, yeah, I can outrun them. You know, and then we saw this, we're like, whoa, these zombies are really, really scary. This is an exciting film. Again, it's a game changer in terms of zombie films. So it makes number 2 on my list. And now my number 1 British horror film is an oldie but goodie. And that's Hellraiser from 1987. Directed by the most impressive Clive Barker in his directorial debut. Isn't he stunning? I love him. I admire him so much as a writer. He is a gorgeous writer. And if you go back and listen to a podcast I did with What a Scream, well, you should be listening to What a Scream to begin with. But anyway, if you go back and listen to our discussion of Hellraiser, you can hear about my unfortunate but very funny encounter with Mr. Barker many, many moons ago. It's kind of an embarrassing story, but he was very much a gentleman. This film stars Andrew Robinson and Claire Higgins, and it introduces us to Pinhead. And I also have a funny story about an encounter I had with a Pinhead actor, but that's a story for another time because this is going very long and I don't like it to be too long. But anyway, you guys remember Pinhead. Some of you might remember going into Blockbuster and seeing that cardboard cutout they had of Pinhead and being terrified, right? So this story begins in Morocco, and I would love one day to go to Morocco, but I don't think it's for poors like me. And we have this man named Frank Cotton, who's a bit of a hedonist, and he buys this puzzle box because he's told that if you solve this puzzle, it opens a door to a realm of otherworldly pleasure. And he goes home, solves the puzzle, and these hook chains emerge, tearing him apart. And this was wild back in the day, as was the costuming of the Cenobites, which has this real like Catholic meets BDSM feel. And again, go back and listen to my podcast. I go on and on about, is the box sort of feminine genitalia, what's going on here. But anyway, let's talk about the movie a little more. Larry, who's Frank's brother, now moves into Frank's house because Frank's dead or gone or whatever. And he's living there with his second wife, Julia, who also had an affair with Frank. And there's some accidental bloodletting that begins to resurrect Frank. And so Julia starts picking up men to feed Frank in a way so that he regenerates fully. And we kind of sort of have a final girl in Larry's daughter, Kirsty, who's trying to put an end to all of this supernatural shenanigans. And we also have the scariest aspect of this film. This shirt. I mean, what in the Cliff Huxtable? It's been many, many moons since I first watched Hellraiser. And then I rewatched it, and this shirt was the biggest jump scare for me. I forgot we had shirts like that back in the day. Oh, God bless. And poor Clive Barker, he really wanted Julia to be the main monster of this very, very popular franchise. But we all love our Pinhead, who was originally called the Engineer. Poor Clive Barker also dealt with some censorship, as the original cuts of this film were too gory and too erotic. And for those of you who are Barker fans like your godmother, that's no shock. We read Clive Barker and we know that he likes to mix his sex and his violence. Despite all these troubles, many viewers loved Hellraiser, and that makes it my number 1 because it has such a memorable monster and such a great franchise for us. So thank you so much for traveling to jolly old England with me. Your godmother loves you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm planning on jumping to South Korea next, so if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button. I wish you happy travels, both in life and in your dreams.